Hello and welcome back to my channel. I am doing another gardening update and I'm going to start with what has been going on in the outdoors. So I did a lot of changes and I've made a lot of updates, and I don't think that the garden looks the way that I expected it to look at the beginning of the season. I had a lot of plans, and as usual I did more than what I planned to do for the season. So the latest things that I've done have been to add 2 narrow raised beds along the second trellis in the yard. I was throwing the idea back and forth of whether or not to put the squash or larger gourds in an actual raised bed. I didn't want them in the ground because I felt like I couldn't manage them too well last season on the ground. I had a cushaw plant that expanded throughout my whole garden. It was like the one side of the garden I could barely walk through. So I definitely wanted to trellis them as best as I could this year. So I made the decision to go ahead and they are 1 foot by 8 foot by 6 inches high. So that gives me enough of the soil away from the ground to try to protect it, as well as to make sure that it gets the proper amendments to it. So that's the plan for the trellis over towards the back. Main differences that I did was also adding a raised bed in between the aronia and the onion bed. Now with the raised bed that I added, this is a totally different raised bed. This is an urban raised garden bed. And the bed itself is made out of a heavy duty canvas material. It's like a fabric canvas material. When I watched the video, originally I was watching a video with Callie Kim, and I saw that she had this raised bed that looked like a fabric, and I was interested. So I went on the website and I looked at its construction and felt, hey, I can do that myself. So I went ahead and purchased it. Now it is a bit pricey. If you want to make an investment, I think it's a good investment. It feels like it's heavy duty, but it's definitely not one of the cheapest ways to do a raised bed. The bag itself is about $70 to $75. I got the 2 foot by 4 foot by 18 inches high bed because I didn't have a very large space. I believe they have a 4 by 4 one as well. In setting up this bed, I made a couple of mistakes. The PVC, you definitely don't want to, if you're using the cement, the PVC cement, you do not want to attach the pieces all together before putting it through the canvas. So on one end of mine, I made that mistake. But on the rest of it, I learned from it and just put it together piece by piece. The gentleman on the website for the urban raised bed put together himself with no problem, and I'm sure he's put together plenty of them, but the bag fought me and it was tough. It took me about 20 minutes to get it put together by itself, and it took him like 5 minutes on the video. So that could have just been me and my limitations, but I found it hard to put the PVC into the canvas and then set it up all together. But once I got it all set up and constructed, filling it was pretty easy. So I did more of a Hugel Coulter method in setting it up. On the bottom, I used some of the brambles from my roses, and I used some sticks that I had from my compost and filled the bottom. And since I had just mulched the whole garden, I took some mulch that was left over and used that at the bottom. So I really did a lot of stuff that was not broken down towards the bottom. In the middle, I used the compost and manure that's by Garden Pro that I got from my local big box store. I've never used it before. I don't know whether to suggest it or recommend it, but it was just something that I wanted to use. And when I touched it and felt it, it seemed like it was a more broken down version of the wood chips that I had used towards the bottom. And then on the top, I use my regular soil mixture, which is peat moss, topsoil, and then I mix in my own fertilizer and vermiculite. I try not to use the coco coir outside because it is expensive, and you get a lot more peat moss to be able to spread around. So I made my own mixture at the top, and since I'm going to be transplanting cucumbers into the bed here, I put the straw on now. I'm not going to be doing any seedlings. I learned, or seeds, direct sowing. So I learned that with the straw that I'm using, if I'm going to be using seedlings, to leave it off, because this year it seemed like a lot more of the straw seeds sprouted, and they may have affected some of my germination rates. So that's the major changes outside in terms of the beds, and I believe that I am done. One more thing that I did put in the backyard, one of my classmates brought over that they were not using or didn't have the space for it anymore. So on the other side of my deck, I'm going to put the rose, and the intention is to allow it to travel along the fence line or allow it to travel along the deck. So one of those two things, depending on how it grows, but right now it's pretty short. It really doesn't reach either one, so I tried my best to lay it horizontally as I could. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.